and welcome to Talking Aussie Books, a weekly podcast bringing readers and writers of Australian fiction together. I'm Claudine Tonellis. As an avid reader and passionate advocate for Australian fiction, I have made it my mission to spotlight local talent. So if you're looking for your next read or simply want to learn more about the Australian literary scene, this podcast is for you. Grab yourself a cuppa, sit back and relax.
It might be the smallest state in Australia, but Tasmania is home to a thriving literary scene as more and more authors take inspiration from its wild and beautiful landscape, a landscape that holds equal appeal to readers who seemingly can't get enough of stories set in Australia's southernmost state. Listeners, my name is Cassie Hamer. I'm an author and avid reader, and I'm delighted to be able to speak with fellow author Rhonda McCoy about her debut novel, Crow, a family drama set in the fictional Tasmanian town of Albert Falls, and a roller coaster ride of small town and family secrets which bubble to the surface following the unexpected death of local farmer Hal Crow. Rhonda, welcome to Talking Aussie Books and congratulations on the publication of the book. I understand that you retired from your professional career in nursing many years ago. So what's it like to find yourself in this new chapter of a professional life?
Well, thanks, Cassie. That was a very writerly and beautiful introduction. Thank you. It's a real privilege for me because I've spent my working life caring for others, and now I'm kind of caring for myself and for my family and my husband. But injected into there is a love of words and reading that I've carried with me forever and given to my daughters, which is a wonderful gift. So for me to be having a second career is just amazing. And it's a great thing for me when I talk to rural libraries, which I'm doing on my book tours, that for older women particularly, life doesn't finish when you hit 65 and you get the farewell party. You've got room and creativity and time to create a whole new world. And that's exactly what I'm doing. It's just so amazing.
You have created a real, authentic feeling world in Crow, and the setting is clearly quite key in this book. I understand that Albert Falls, where it's set, is fictional, but heavily based on Bothwell or Bothwell. I'm not sure of the pronunciation.
Bothwell.
Can you tell me, Bothwell, can you tell me a bit about it? And what about it inspired you for this book?
It's a beautiful town set. It's in the Southern Highlands. It's a farming town. So there's quite a vibrant hub of a main street with an amazing post office cafe that I did a chat a couple of weeks ago. It's filled with really interesting characters who are resilient because it's quite isolated. It's about 2 hours to Hobart, 2.5 hours to Launceston. They're resilient, they're connected to each other, they care about each other. And I'm actually going to go back there and spend a week and write in the very near future because I want to immerse myself in it rather than just visiting and walking through the streets. The houses are beautiful. David and Morven's house is a house that I've seen in Bothwell. I've taken photos of it. I haven't been game enough to knock on the door and have a look in, but I'm using my imagination. But it's a beautiful place. And as you said in your introduction, Tasmanians like to read about their place because we're very proud of it and we love it. And mainlanders, that's a Tasmanian term, mainlanders really love to read about Tasmania. It's like this unique, it's one step to Antarctica. And it's just a beautiful place. It's got some mystique to it as well.
There's no doubt that the remoteness and, as I said, sort of the wildness of it really captures readers' imaginations. But I think it's also the people and the number of sort of small town communities. And that's particularly important in your book. And it's so interesting because one of the characters, Nathan, who's a young nurse, and the book starts in his point of view, he says, I'm quoting from the book here. Vivid green fronds of various moss species, all crowding in on each other, covered the boggy soil. It was a good metaphor for how the people were in this place. It's such an interesting comment because it seems like the smallness of a community can be as much a blessing as it is a curse.
Mm. And I'm glad that you picked that piece out, because when we went to Bothwell the first time that I had an idea for a book in my head, we went behind the church and it had been raining, and I actually dipped my toe into the moss and I took a photo of it, and I just spent a couple of minutes thinking about that place, and then I put it in the book.
There are lots of those very important, specific details in this book. Are you someone who is a note taker, and are those really fine details important to you?
Yes, I am a note taker, Cassie, and I guess in my nursing career we always had to take contemporaneous notes, and that word appears in the book. These days I either take a little notebook with me wherever I go, or I take my phone and I just write in my notes section. And for me, it's very important to get those tiny little minutiae, because I like to read about those too. It's almost like slow food. It's like slow reading, that you can give the reader a bit of a rest from the mayhem that the author is creating. But I like to be able to talk about Morven in her kitchen and folding her clothes and gardening. I'm not a gardener. I had to do a lot of research, but I wanted to give the reader a little bit of a delightful rest.
And there's no doubt it does that. It gives real sort of texture, I suppose, to the portraits that you paint of the people and the place. But let's talk a little bit more about the specifics of the story. And as I mentioned in the introduction, the book circles around the death of local farmer Hal Crow, who's died after what it should have been a fairly routine treatment in the local hospital. But while Hal is important, the key family in this narrative is the Boyd family, particularly David Boyd, who is Hal's best friend and the real reason that Hal moved to Albert Falls. But it is his death that sets off quite a dramatic chain of events in the Boyd family and uncovers all sorts of secrets about love affairs, secret babies, and unexpected inheritances. I'm wondering, what was the main inspiration for you to write this story, which really is a family drama, I think, at its heart?
Well, I was introduced to Hal as a real person. I don't know what his name is, in a small bakery in Cal in South Australia. My husband and I were travelling to Fiona McIntosh's masterclass, and I'd stopped to buy some morning tea. And Hal was standing in the bakery, flirting outrageously with a young girl behind the counter. And he was in his 60s. He had beautiful white jeans on, periwinkle, I think it's called periwinkle shoes, the pointy toe shoes. He had a linen shirt on that was all crumpled, and he was buying his daily pasty. And I was just standing back, and I'd been thinking, I'd finished my first book. I was thinking about what I would do for my second book, and I thought, oh, you're too good to pass up. You're coming with me. And so he walked out of the bakery, and my husband was in the car with the dog, and he put his head in the car to pat Reuben. And so Keith had a conversation with him too. So I had a snippet of information. So I carried him with me through the masterclass. Then as we were driving away from the masterclass, a clutch of crows flew across our car. And so the book became A Murder of Crows, but I changed the title, of course. So I knew that there needed to be a death, and I didn't really want to kill Hal off because he was so wonderful. So I did kill him off really so that the reader would sit up and take notice in the first chapter. I wanted them to keep turning the page. But I wove him through the story because when people lead big lives, they have an impact on people. Sometimes it's positive and sometimes it's not. And so I wanted the town to reflect on how the importance and the warmth he'd brought to the town, but also the secrets that he'd left behind. So Hal came first, Bothwell came second, And then I just assembled a cast of characters and I let them take me where they wanted to go.
The story does come from a number of different points of view of your
Mm.
cast of characters, which is quite a large one. But
Mm.
I get the sense, and I don't know if you agree, that Morven, who you've mentioned, who's David's wife, is perhaps our main character.
Mm.
She happens to be Scottish and she does speak with quite a strong voice in that Scottish way. When we meet her at the start, fair to say that she's quite under the thumb of her husband,
Mm.
David, who's the
Yeah.
local GP. She's sort of the last of that generation, I think, of women whose husbands have really discouraged them from working. So she hasn't had a professional career of her own. How do you see Morven? And do you think that she's the main character?
Yes, I do. And I love Morven. I love her name. When I first signed the contract with Jane Curry at Ventura, she wanted to change the name to something else. She felt that perhaps readers would trip over the name. But the editor, Lauren Finger, she liked the name. And so she said, we'll keep it. And I'm really pleased she did, because there's some interesting storyline around the way Morven's name is pronounced, that intimacy with her and David. And yes, she was under the thumb, which has certainly not been my experience in my marriage. My husband has championed me in everything that I've done. So I wanted to explore what it would be like to live inside a character who was feeling oppressed. And I guess part of the message or theme in the book is that it's never too late. It is never too late.
Because she's really not the only character who I suppose embraces a new way of being by the end of the novel. That's the case for many of the characters.
Mm.
And if fiction is really the story of transformation, that's a transformation that happens for several people in your
Mm.
book.
That's right. With Cynthia, the director of nursing, she keeps everyone's secrets. And of course, I was a director of nursing, and my friend thinks that I am Cynthia, and reluctantly, I claim that I am. But she keeps a secret of her own that's alluded to about halfway through the book. And her secret is my secret.
Hmm.
So that's another theme that I wanted to explore, allowing younger generations to have some understanding of how different women in my generation, how judged we sometimes felt. And I wanted people to really understand that. And my daughters, who have known my secret, they've read the book and they said, yeah, that gives us some understanding of where you are and why you're here.
You mentioned that, you've carried this secret for a long time. And if it's not too personal, it would be lovely to speak about a piece that you wrote for The Guardian, which is
Yeah.
an online news website.
Mhm.
And you spoke with such love and honesty about both the beauty and the challenge of meeting your dear husband at the age of 15, which is so young by
Yeah.
today's standards. I wonder if you can just tell us a little bit more about that story and the ups and downs that you had in those early years.
Yes, well, I guess because the story has been told in The Guardian, it's a bit of a spoiler, but I will go ahead. I met Keith when I was very young. I came from quite a dysfunctional family in a way, and Keith provided, even though he was young and finding his way, because he'd lost his mother when he was 14, we clung together and we survived. And we had a baby that we relinquished. And yeah, that's what I wanted to put into the book, that sometimes women who are older have climbed big mountains and
Mm.
they've thrived. And I guess that's the message I want to send to people, that you can thrive from adversity. You just have to pick yourself up and surround yourself with people who love you, and you'll be okay.
It's really hard to imagine a very young person of 17 or 18 in today's world being in that situation of being essentially forced to give up a baby. It's
Yeah.
something that I think we all hope and pray doesn't happen today. But what was so lovely in that article that you wrote about it was that there seems to be a happy-ish ending to the story. Are you happy to share what's happened
Yeah.
since?
Yes, I am, Cassie. Keith and I decided, because of course we married and we had two girls, and there was always something missing. And so on our son's birthday, I would take the day off work and I would just go to ground because it wasn't okay to celebrate. And of course, I'd been told by my father that you don't talk about these things. So we did initiate finding him. And then when he was 25, he came looking for his mother and he found the whole thing, which was, I think in some ways was quite challenging, quite beautiful for him because he has two lovely sisters that he loves. And of course, he's not connected biologically to his siblings in his family. So there was a period of checking each other out and seeing what the similarities were and the fact that he laughed the same as Keith and he had a soft side like Amanda. Yeah, that has been a very joyous thing. It hasn't been completely easy because he deals with the fact that he was relinquished. I deal with the sadness of relinquishing. So it's an ongoing story, but it is wonderful and I'm very grateful.
Thank you so much for your honesty in sharing that, because you are not the only person who has been through this. And I do believe that in sharing our stories of great challenge, that it helps other people to feel less alone who've been through a
Yes.
similar thing to what you've been through. But I'm wondering, how do you take these experiences and then sort of mold them and shape them into your fiction?
My daughter read the book as soon as it was released, and she kept on phoning me or texting me saying, "Oh my goodness, page 64, that's me," or "That's my son." And so she thinks that she sees me and the family on every page, which may be a bit of a disclaimer because I'm supposed to be writing fiction. But they say you need to write what you know. And in all of my writing, I want to be authentic. I want people to think she's writing real stuff, but it's just set in a fictional world. And the same goes with my launches and my events. I want to go with an open heart so that people will see that I'm just an ordinary person who sits at a computer and spends hours writing for the love of it, because there's not a lot of money in it and we're not in it for the money. We are here to connect with people. And I've spent my whole life connecting with people in a therapeutic way. And it's so wonderful to hear people like you who pull bits of the book out that you relate to, because I want to connect with people. That's why I'm writing.
I'd love to talk a bit more about your path to writing, because as you've said, you had a really lengthy, successful career in nursing, leading to management positions. But when you retired 7 years ago, that seems to be when the writing bug really struck. Or maybe it's more fair to say that's when the writing bug was allowed to flourish. What is it that keeps you coming back to the desk? It sounds like this is not a new thing at all. It's something that you've loved for a while. So, what was it that made you finally go, okay, now's the time for me?
Mm. I think you're right in that being retired and Keith was unwell, we spend a lot of time at home. We have quite a small life in a way. So writing is my big world. And, the whole launch and the crazy world that I'm living in at the moment is big. And then I'll go back into writing and I'm going to start writing my fifth book this afternoon. But I've always liked writing. So I write letters. I write to my girls. I write speeches. So I've always written. And of course, I've written in my career. But yeah, just giving myself permission to make space for words and putting words on a page is just the most delicious thing.
Was writing a novel always the dream, though? Or because it sounds like there were other forms of writing that you equally enjoyed, and I've also read your blog, which is terrific too.
Oh, thank you. Sounds a little grandiose to say, because a lot of writers probably say it, that I always thought there was a book inside me. And I've had a rich and different and quite blessed life. And there are a lot of stories inside me. So they kind of bubble up and I need to find a place to put them. So I'm putting them on paper, I guess.
Hmm. So the book does go into some detail around the processes of the inquest into Hal's death and the
Yep.
recommendations for the hospital that come out
Mm.
of it. For Cynthia, she's referred to as matron, but she's the nursing manager essentially. It's hugely stressful, and these sentiments are very authentically rendered. Obviously, you probably didn't need to research much of these aspects given your long career in nursing, but it also struck me how, in some ways, nursing provides such a rich source of material for writers,
Mm.
as it's a job that brings you into contact with so many different people and often at really difficult moments in their lives. What do you think about the connection between your nursing career and your writing today? Do you think there is one?
Oh, yes, I do think it's the backbone because I draw on my interactions with people for characters. And in the book, there is a scene where Morven and David are receiving very bad news. And I've sat beside people in that situation, in that very room that I described. So, yeah, I am pulling bits of my, really just my connection with people more
Mm.
than anything. And of course, the inquest, even though you said I probably didn't need to do much research, I went and sat in on an inquest for 4 days, and that was fascinating. They just allocated an inquest to me, and I was invited to come. It was an unexpected death on a farm, and the doctor that was called on the stand to give testimony, I'd worked with him. So that was really interesting. I was so interested in the way the lawyers puffed themselves up with this kind of English formality. I just found that I really enjoyed writing that chapter because I knew it was real, really real. It was great. Loved it.
Can see how much authenticity matters so much to you. I'm wondering though, just with the nursing, it is often said that you should write what you know, but I
Mm,
think that really alludes to the fact that you should draw on emotional truths that
mm,
you know to be
mm.
real. And I suppose my question is, are there any, this is a very hard question to answer, perhaps, but are there any general things that you came to understand about humans via your nursing, given that you were seeing often people at their worst times?
Yes, you talked about authenticity, and I think as a nurse, when you are talking with people at the very worst stages in their lives, if you do your job and you open your heart to them, you get that authenticity back. And so some of the things that I remember that I'm interested in writing in my next book are around the interaction between nurses and families of people who are watching their loved one die. And I'm very interested in that because I remember a lot of those instances. I still can see the faces. I can remember what was said. I can remember the comfort and the love that came back to me too, you know. I nursed a woman who had a crocheted shawl, and I used to tuck that shawl around her after I'd given her a morning wash, and I'll call her Enid. And I used to say, let's get Enid's shawl, we'll put Enid's shawl around her. And then when she died, I went to her funeral, and her son presented me with Enid's shawl. And I have it today, and I wrap it around my shoulders.
That is just so beautiful. Nurses are special people, and to nurse someone, though, in their final days is both tremendously challenging, but I suppose also a privilege in the way that you get a very intimate look into someone's life, perhaps.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And while I didn't explore that in Crow, I am going to explore that in my next book, which I think will probably be a sequel. My publisher will probably pull her hair out when I say that, but I can't let those characters go yet.
It's interesting you say that, because just before we hopped on for this interview, I had a look at the last couple of pages, and I really feel like you leave the door open with a little bit of a crack to invite us into that next chapter. Was that intentional?
No, it wasn't, Cassie, and I thought that I'd just write that and it would be done. And I wrote it 5 years ago, but bringing it back out and doing the editing and now the promotion of the book, I do really love those characters. And the characters that are in the book that are in their 20s, if I age them 25 years, they're going to be really coming into their own. And there's a lot of gold in that, I think.
There sure is, because you really put those characters through a hell of a lot now. And while you have a certain resilience when you're in your 20s, that can sometimes start to crack, I suppose, when you're in your 40s.
Mm.
Now, a name that's also come up a couple of times in our chat today is that of Fiona McIntosh. And I'm
Yes.
sure many of our listeners would have heard of this best-selling author. But what they might not know is that Fiona does run these incredible writing retreats referred to as masterclass, where she teaches the fundamentals of writing. And it sounds like masterclass was quite a turning point for you. And what was it about that experience that you found so inspirational?
When I decided to write, I went into our local bookshop and I said to Andy, who owns the bookshop, I want to write. I don't know where to start, where to get my skills. Can you help me? And she said, go and do a Fiona McIntosh masterclass. So that entailed me travelling to South Australia, quite a lot of expense, but it just opened the door for me. And Fiona, we had to present a body of work and she critiqued each person's work individually. She said that I could do it. And that really surprised me because I thought I was just playing around at the edges. But she said I could do it. And she said, you will do it. You'll be fine. You've got what it takes. And so, yeah, it punched a bit of a hole in the imposter syndrome for me. And when I've been writing for 7 years, not getting anywhere, sometimes wanting to give up. I have a great friend that I met at the masterclass, Denise, who kept on telling me not to give up. And so when I felt like giving up, Fiona's voice and Denise's voice would come into my head and I'd think, no, I'm not going to give up. I'm not spending much money. It keeps me out of the shops because I'm writing and it's something that I love to do. So yeah, the masterclass was amazing. I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
The writing life is full of rejection and hardship, and sometimes it is hard to figure out why the hell we're still doing it. But it's incredible how just having one or two people who really believe in you and tell you to keep going is so important. I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit about your publisher at Ventura, Jane, who seems like a similar kind of person. And how did you come to meet Jane and be published by Ventura?
Well, I'm glad you asked me about that because I'd written 4 books by this stage. I was submitting them, not getting anywhere, not really getting much feedback. And I thought I need to do something a bit different. And so I was reading the acknowledgements in the back of a book, and the author had referred to Irina Dunn as a literary agent. And so I emailed her, not expecting anything. I'd approached lots of literary agents, and she emailed back straight away, and she made me work really hard on Crow. I had to edit it, and she kept on saying, no, it's not quite right. Your query letter's not right. Your synopsis is not right. So she really made me work. But I was getting feedback. For the first time, I was getting feedback. And so she sent it to a variety of publishers, and Jane was interested. And so I was very excited. We set up a Zoom. From the very first moment that I saw Jane on the screen, I thought, I want to work with you. You've got so much to teach me. And she has been amazing. She's just been available. Her team are available. They've got a sense of humour. She believes in championing women of a certain age because they've got something to talk about. And I think that's wonderful. I feel like I've fallen down the right rabbit hole at exactly the right time.
One of the lovely things about publishing is that it's not ageist. I find if your
Mm.
story is good enough, then a publisher is going to be really interested in it.
Mm.
As you mentioned, though, you had written a few manuscripts and you did a lot of work on this one. What would you say was the key thing about this one that made it publishable?
I think it was the characters. I think the characters drove the plot. And I didn't really know where the plot was going, but I would go to bed of a night and think, tomorrow I'm going to write from Nathan's perspective. I wonder what he'll get up to. And I know that sounds crazy, but I would wake up with the answer. I just put it into my subconscious. So they really drove the plot. And sometimes I'd be writing and think, wow, are we really going to go down this road? And I'd be tapping away like mad and forgetting about the time and wanting to finish that bit. And at the end of it, I'd think, that was a wild ride. I didn't expect to go down that way. They were a gift to me.
It sounds like you are the ultimate pantser, or a nicer way to put it is that you are a discovery writer. Something that you've blogged about is the murky art of finding your voice. I'm
Mm.
wondering now, what does that mean to you, and how would you define your voice?
Well, I did quite a lot of classes and lessons and things with the Australian Writers Centre, and they talked a lot about voice. And I thought, I don't really know what they're talking about. I have a voice that I speak. Should I put that voice on the page? I talked to my book club about it. They said, just be your own self. We like listening to you. But I really had to play around with it. I wasn't quite sure whether I was getting it right. But I think in Crow, I think I did get it right. And I learnt a lot about myself and the art of writing in Crow. So I'm hoping that the next two books that came, and certainly the fourth book now that's sitting on Jane's desk for her consideration, I'm hoping that the lessons I learnt in Crow have been woven into those two books.
As you may know, a lot of aspiring writers listen to this podcast, and I'm
Mm.
sure they'd be interested to know if you are happy to share what one or two of those lessons were that you learned from writing this book that you plan to take forward.
Well, one lesson isn't really related to writing, but related to life. My husband said when the book was first published and he started to read it, he said, so what is writing Crow? What has it taught you? And I had to have a think about that. And basically, I was very interested in exploring and getting right the relationship or friendship between Morven and Cynthia, which does develop. And, there are some hiccups along the way and some secrets kept and that developing of trust. And so I learnt from a personal point of view how very important being connected and having wonderful and sustaining relationships and friendships are. So that was one thing that I learnt for me, which I hope I'll put back into my writing. The other thing that I learnt, which is quite a technical thing for writers, is that I was doing a course on structure in the middle of Crow, and I felt that Crow had kind of fallen, the guts had fallen out of it in the middle, and I was ready to put it aside. So I thought I'll do a course on structure just to get me reinvigorated. And the teacher was talking about developing a spine or a linear representation of the book with how the characters connected. And so I was picturing a fish graph, and I worked a lot with graphs and things in my nursing career, and I thought, oh my goodness, that's a lot of trouble. I'm not going to do that. That's ridiculous. And then the next day I was listening to a podcast of an author in Western Australia, and she was asked the same question that you asked me. And she said, well, I did a graph, I did a timeline, and I thought, oh, I better do that. And so I've actually got that. I drew it free form and took a photo of it and I've printed it, and it's behind my desk. So that was really the turning point for me, that I pulled Crow in the Doldrums, I pulled it back up into my interesting spot. And that's when I really started to connect the characters in all sorts of different ways. And so that's what I do now. I make a spine. The only planning that I do.
Very interesting. And I'm curious about this concept of graphing because it sounds a little bit like mapping out story
Yes,
beats. Is that what you're saying?
yes, yeah.
Making sure that each character has their own trajectory
Yes,
and arc, and also
yes,
that each storyline, I suppose, intersects and weaves
yes.
together.
Yeah. And has some resolution at the end.
It's like trying to put together a quilt, all these different patchwork of stories, and you
Yeah.
try to make something
Mm,
cohesive and
mm,
whole at the end of
mm.
it. Something I've also, I think, read about you is that you use music quite a bit when you're writing.
Yes, it was a tip that Fiona gave us in the masterclass. I'm not a great listener of music, but if I find that I'm not nailing the emotion that I want to write about, I will just listen to a bit of music on Spotify through my phone just to get me into the groove. And certainly in the book, David, who likes to think he's a bit of a highbrow, I thought I'd give him music so that he could show off. And I really enjoyed the research into that. And he loved Pachelbel's Canon, which is one of my favourite pieces. And so I played that over and over and over again just to get inside David's head, I guess.
Tell me, what kind of music do you think you might be playing this afternoon when you get started on your next book? Or do you have an idea at the moment of where that story is going to go? Because obviously, with it being a sequel, you have a certain cast of characters,
Mm.
you have a setting already decided for you. Does it feel in a way like that makes it easier, or is that kind of constriction a challenge?
I think it makes it harder in a way. And a couple of people have said, oh, don't go near sequels. If your book's successful, if Crow's successful, people will be expecting a little bit more. But I feel like I've got more to give. So I'm reasonably confident about that. Regards music, I would probably talk to people or research people who are in their mid to late 20s about what kind of music they like, what they're listening to on Spotify. I just find that tapping into the music side really helps me to get into the characters' heads.
Well, I think you're in for quite a discovery when you look into music that people in their 20s like. I've got three teenagers, and some of their music just sort of blows my mind a little bit. But just to finish up on, I suppose I really just want to know, what is it that you'd like readers to take away from Crow?
Oh, that's a lovely question. I guess I'd like them to have a think about the issues around friendship and connection and love. At the launch, Andy asked me, she said, do you think love conquers all? That was a hard question with 80 people in front of me. But I guess the message would be is that love in relationships and friendships is really important. It's something that needs to be respectful. And while it mightn't conquer everything, it just gives us a safety blanket to continue on through difficult times. So I'd like to see readers think that it's a story of hope, that people can go through really tough times and find their way out of it at the end.
It is a story of hope. Your characters do find resolution and a way to be true to themselves. And I suppose, in a way, it mimics your own story of coming to this new path in life. So I just want to congratulate you again, Rhonda, on a really terrific debut, and wish you all the best for that sequel, which I will be keen to read.
Thank you, Cassie. It's been just a delight to talk to you. Thank you so much.
That's it for this episode, folks. Hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. If so, I'd love it if you'd leave a review on your preferred listening platform, which may include Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Amazon Music. Until next time, friends, happy reading!